An increasing number of Reading homes are being left derelict despite the fact that over 5,000 people are waiting for council housing. One local resident says a property on her road has been left in rack and ruin.
It has been empty now 6 or 7 years, maybe even longer. People coming into Reading along the Christchurch Road, this building stares out at them. It's completely derelict, windows are broken. Every so often the area in front of it, I won't call it a garden, but the driveway and things, is just filled with rubbish and litter, and it's generally in a terrible mess. Every so often the people who own it do a bit of work in it, and then it's all closed up again, and that's the end of it. We have been in touch with the council on many, many occasions, and they have tried their hardest, but I don't understand why they can't do more than they're doing.
OK, well, in a second we're going to hear from David Ireland, Chief Executive of the Empty Homes Agency, a charity set up to highlight the waste of empty property in England. First of all, let's have a word with Daisy Benson, a Liberal Democrat spokesperson who's campaigned to reduce the number of derelict houses in the Reading area alone. Good morning to you.
Hello.
So why this disparity then? Because it seems we're getting an increasing number of derelict houses, but we're seeing 5,000 people on the council housing waiting list.
Yeah, well, Reading has a very big private renters sector, and there's a big disparity.
Talk to me about why we are seeing an increasing number of homes becoming derelict, first of all, and then we'll move on to what can be done to address that.
At the current time in the recession, owners are finding it very expensive to bring homes back into use. The market's depressed, so and there's also a lack of incentives for them to bring them back into use. So
for some landlords, they actually feel it's more cost-effective to keep their house empty in the current economic climate.
It sounds awful, but that's true. In the first 6 months, council tax is not charged, and in many cases, sitting on their hands is seen as a better option for owners.
I know that Reading is no worse than anywhere else in our patch. In fact, the number of houses versus the number of people on the waiting list, pretty much universal across the patch. And I know it must seem very simplistic, bearing in mind the various hoops that you have to jump through to say there are all of these houses empty and all of these people on a council waiting list. Is there anything that can be done to force private landlords to rent out to council tenants?
Well, actually, there are various things. There's actually powers that councils have, but usually the work that the Empty Homes Officer does in Reading Borough Council is have conversations, understand what the obstacles are, and we have particularly a pressure on the number of family-sized houses for people on low incomes. And, for example, we've got big pressure on development. So rather than sort of demolishing places and cramming more flats on a site, which is what's been happening in lots of parts of Reading, why not try and make those homes available, for example, to housing associations or to charities? The last resort is to use the law to take those homes, sort of force the owner to vacate those properties. But there's all sorts of other sort of softer ways which save money in the long term and reduce the number of people who are waiting sometimes up to 2 years for family-sized housing.
But based upon the situation that we've got, it would suggest that the softer ways aren't really working, wouldn't it?
It takes time. I mean, I'm aware that I think we're looking at up to 9 this year are being brought back into use, which is still better than none at all. It's costing, I think, around £5,000 a year to the owners to keep them empty themselves. The number of people waiting for houses is growing. I think anything that the council can do is got to be a good thing. And it's also, I think it's cost effective. I think for the time that's spent, if we get 9 homes brought back into use, that's the number of families. And I speak to families who could be waiting 2 years. So we've got to really look at all options.
But we're talking about 9 homes out of 517 were recorded empty in 2009, which is up from the 468 in 2008 here in Reading. Is it not time to take sterner action?
Well, to be honest, the reason for that is for years nothing was done. I mean, when I picked up on this issue, I thought, why is there no policy, no strategy? And in the early 90s, Reading Borough Council had won awards for its work. So it's because nothing's been done over a number of years. If we're actually proactive now, we can sort of reverse the situation. But I know that, for example, the Empty Homes Agency is looking at ways of making it much quicker way to bring them back into use. But in Reading, it's just too little has been done for too long.
OK. Let's have a word with David Ireland now, Chief Executive of the Empty Homes Agency. Good morning to you, David.
Good morning.
So is this situation unique to this part of the country? I'm guessing not.
No, not at all, no. I'm afraid what we've seen over the last 3 years is the number of empty homes across the country has gone up. I mean, mercifully not as much as I think some people predicted and not as much as some other countries in Europe. But nevertheless, it's a problem. We've got much more housing need in this country than others. But the thing that we're particularly seeing at the moment is it's actually getting a lot more difficult for homes to come back into use. And so homes that are staying empty, falling empty, are actually staying empty for a lot longer than they were 2 or 3 years ago.
OK, this isn't just about the number of people on council waiting lists either, because for people who are living alongside empty properties that are falling into all sorts of disrepair, that can be very unsightly, can't it, to live around?
Oh, sure, and I heard the lady earlier, and I feel for her actually. Where I live, there's an empty house that's been empty for a few years, a couple of doors up the road as well, and I know how quickly properties can deteriorate, and the sort of antisocial behaviour which is attracted to vacant property. So all sorts of people suffer from this. But I think Daisy's absolutely right as well. There's every time you see a vacant property, actually that's somewhere where if something different were done, actually that could be somebody's home, and the amount of difference a good home makes to a family is enormous. It's actually not just the family that benefits. Actually, the owner benefits from that as well, because leaving a property vacant, actually, they lose value of their investment and their asset as well. So, making use of a property benefits not only the people that are in there, but the neighbours and also the owner as well.
Let me just touch finally on the legislation that was introduced in 2006, which allows an authority to order the compulsory purchase of an empty property. To what extent has that legislation been utilised? Because the figures suggest not very much, really.
Well, it's 27 times across the country in the last 3 years. So you're right, not a great deal. I mean, I think that perhaps that figure slightly disguises the amount of times that councils have started using it, and then owners have thought, well, OK, I'll go and do something about it myself. But I think, nevertheless, 27 times over 3 years across the country is slightly disappointing. And if councils were having great success with all the other ways of bringing homes back into use, well, fair enough. But in some places in the country, the councils are not really doing quite enough. And what I would say, to people who are listening to this is, if there's properties which are empty in their area, what you need to do is report them to the council, because actually councils respond to things quite well, but they're not very good. A lot of them are not very good at being proactive. So if you see properties that are empty, report them to the council, or report them to us. We've got a website called reportemptyhomes.com. Report them on there, and that'll go straight to the council, and then the council can actually deal with them.
OK, David, thank you. That's David Ireland, Chief Executive of the Empty Homes Agency.